So there are essentially two fronts to this war. There's Israel's battle with Hamas in the Gaza Strip, and then resulting from that, after the attack by Hamas on October 7th that provoked the Israeli campaign in the Gaza Strip, you've seen increasingly intense fire between Hezbollah and Israel. And in recent weeks, that essentially turned into a full-blown war where you had Hezbollah launching missiles from Lebanon into Israel, and you also had Israel widening the scope of a pretty devastating campaign against Hezbollah in Lebanon, taking out many of its top leaders and also striking targets in the heart of Beirut, essentially, turning that city essentially into a war zone. So that was where the Biden administration and others, such as France, which was also a sort of handmaiden to this deal, found the prospect for an agreement, and that's really where they focus. So what you see today is the Biden administration getting that pause. Hopefully, they say it'll be much longer than a pause. It'll be a permanent ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah, and then, as the president mentioned there, that would then in turn allow for pressure to be put on Israel and Hamas to get the much thornier agreement, which would be an end to the violence in the Gaza Strip. That's still quite a long ways off. No indication that would be able to be completed by the end of Biden's term and when President-elect Trump takes over.
Nick, safe to say that the Israel war in Lebanon and that was not very popular with the people of Israel. But I do wonder about bringing some kind of end to what's happening in Gaza. Is that as likely? Should we assume that an end to that is just around the corner, or these are two different fronts and two different stories here?
Yeah, I mean, that's we've had a lot of false hopes over the months since October 7th, 2023, when Hamas launched that attack on Israel, that we would see something. There had been a very brief ceasefire at one point. But, you know, the intractable problem there is that Israel says it will not stop the fight in Gaza until Hamas no longer exists as a fighting force. Hamas, meanwhile, says even though it's in a vastly degraded state, it says it will not end the fighting until Israel withdraws from the Gaza Strip. I mean, those are two fundamentally oppositional goals, and so far the two sides have found no way to be able to reconcile them. You also obviously have the fate of the Israeli hostages. There's a dwindling number of those hostages, but there are many still believed to be alive in Gaza. Israel wants them back. Hamas does not want to give them up because then it has no leverage, essentially, against Israel. So a much thornier, much more intractable conflict. And it looks like, with the Biden administration having less than 2 months in office, that's going to be a very, very big hill to climb for them to be able to wrap that up.
So that's exactly where I wanted to end, Nick, is the idea of the incoming administration versus the Biden administration. So what the Trump administration has said about the war is happening right now, versus what the Biden administration has said and tried to do, and even today's development. How does that change when President-elect Trump takes office on January 20th?
Well, that's the question that is really front and center for everyone, because President-elect Trump has essentially given some pretty conflicting remarks on that, saying on the one hand he believes that Israel should be allowed to finish the job, so that to many people suggests step up its campaign in the Gaza Strip against Hamas. He's also said, though, that he wants it to be wrapped up as quickly as possible. So you could see a situation where Trump essentially puts more pressure on Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, gives him a free rein to do more of what he wants, but less time to do it. He would have some more leverage over Netanyahu because of the relationship between the two of them. Trump and Netanyahu have a much cozier relationship than Biden and Netanyahu, which was much more standoffish. So really difficult to know how that plays out because, of course, Hamas has a say here. They can keep up the fight themselves. But certainly President-elect Trump has promised to bring this to a swift end. The challenge, though, of course, as I say, is his way of doing that is to give Israel more of a free hand. So we'll have to see how that plays out.